Imagine this for a moment. You drift off to sleep in your own bed in the modern world. Lights humming faintly from the city outside. Your phone glowing with notifications on the nightstand. And then, as dreams weave their strange patterns, you open your eyes again and something feels distinctly wrong. The mattress beneath you is gone. The air smells of wood smoke, straw, and something earthy, maybe not entirely pleasant. Instead of drywall and painted ceilings, above you the roof is thatched reeds lashed together, shadows dancing from a dim fire across uneven walls of wattle and daub plaster. Somewhere nearby, a rooster is announcing dawn with such enthusiasm it could be mistaken for stubborn arrogance. You blink and sit up. You've woken not in your own century, but in the medieval world. Your head swims with confusion, because of course, in your mind, this shouldn't be possible. The year ought to be 2024, but here you are, with no electricity, no buzzing of appliances, no cars whizzing in the distance. Outside, you hear the rhythmic creak of wooden wheels and the shuffling of hooves through dirt. Voices call out in accents that sound vaguely familiar but clearly older, words packed with archaic flavor. Slowly, realization dawns on you. You are in a village, and judging by the architecture and lack of modern trappings, you are somewhere in Europe's Middle Ages, perhaps around the 13th century. The era of castles, knights, plagues, peasants, and monasteries, the world you learned about through textbooks and television. Only this time there's no safe exit button, no tour guides, no fantasy overlay, just you and this world you've somehow stumbled into. The first thing you notice is the sheer simplicity of your surroundings. The house, if it can be called such, is one room, mostly bare, save for a few rickety stools and a table propped up by uneven legs. The bedding is little more than a sack stuffed with straw. In the corner, a few clay pots and wooden bowls sit stacked on a low shelf. A fire crackles faintly, filling the hut with smoke that escapes lazily through a hole in the roof. Compared to the comfort of modern life, this seems laughably primitive, even harsh. Yet to the villagers around you, this is life as usual. As you step outside, your eyes adjust to the morning light. The road is little more than a beaten stretch of dirt, rutted deep from wagons and slick with last night's rain. Chickens peck and scratch at the mud, while a skinny dog darts between huts, yapping before being hushed by a woman carrying a wooden pail. Children, barefoot and smeared with dirt, are already chasing each other with sticks, laughing in accents strange but spirited. Men shuffle toward the fields, carrying crude wooden tools, while women begin their morning work of baking coarse bread in outdoor clay ovens or milking goats tethered nearby. The air is thick with the mingled scents of animals, smoke, damp earth, and humanity. A smell you realize is the daily perfume of medieval life. There are no paved streets, no tall glass buildings, no neon signs advertising coffee and pastries. Instead, the heart of the community appears to be a wooden church a little down the road, its bell ringing faintly to call people to morning service. Its spire, though small and simple, rises above the cluster of cottages like a beacon. Religion, you realize, is the binding glue of this time. These people's every thought, every fear, every joy is filtered through faith. And you, an outsider with modern knowledge, find yourself wondering how exactly you fit into this picture. Your clothing is out of place. Whatever you were wearing in bed last night is clearly not fit for the muddy reality of medieval Europe. If it was something soft and modern, it now marks you as strange. The villagers look at you suspiciously, not hostile yet, but cautious, their eyes narrowing as though measuring whether you are a harmless wanderer or something more unsettling. In this time, difference is not always tolerated well. Outsiders could be branded vagabonds, heretics, or even sorcerers. Already, you feel the weight of history's mistrust press upon you. To find your footing here, you must quickly learn what daily life in the medieval times entails. Forget cars, forget grocery deliveries, forget technology. Here, survival is hands-on, demanding, and communal. Villagers rise with the sun not because they want to, but because the rhythms of nature leave them no choice. The day begins early, for work stretches long into evening. Food is what can be grown, caught, or bartered, and survival depends heavily on cooperation. If you want to blend in, you'll need to understand the rhythms of this life without betraying too much of your bewilderment. The houses around you are built simply, with timber frames filled in by clay and straw, topped with thatch that drips after every rainstorm. Floors are often just dirt, sometimes strewn with rushes, which need replacing when they become too filthy or moldy. Privacy is minimal. Entire families share the same room. Chickens may even wander indoors at night. The warmth of the fire in the central hearth is precious, but smoke blackens the beams overhead. Your modern lungs cough against the haze, but for them, it is simply the air they've always known. The food here is basic but sufficient when times are good. A thick, coarse bread forms the cornerstone of every meal, supplemented by pottage, a type of stew made of whatever grains, beans, or vegetables are available. Meat is rare for peasants, usually reserved for festivals or hunting seasons, and often stringy or salted until leathery. Dairy, eggs, and ale provide the bulk of sustenance. The ale is weak, almost more like liquid bread than intoxicating drink, but safer than many water sources. You realize quickly that if you want to survive here, you cannot turn your nose up at a bowl of lumpy pottage or a cup of cloudy ale. These are not optional treats. They are the fuel that keeps the body alive through endless hours of toil. The sounds of the village are very different from modern life. There is no distant roar of engines, no planes overhead, only the bleating of sheep, the rooster's persistent crowing, and the clang of blacksmiths at their anvils. A cart creaks along the muddy track, its wooden wheels unevenly striking the ruts. A cow lows in protest as it's pulled to pasture. Voices carry easily in this small world, echoing fragments of laughter, argument, and prayer. It is a constant hum of life, and though strange to you, it possesses its own rhythm, its own heartbeat. Yet beneath the rustic calm lies constant danger. Illness lingers always at the edge of survival. A simple infection, a poorly healed wound, or even spoiled food can spell death. You are acutely aware of the absence of modern medicine. There is no hospital, no pharmacy, no doctor with sterile equipment. Instead, a village healer might offer herbs, charms, or rituals, their knowledge passed down through generations of trial and error. A toothache here is not just an annoyance, it can become a fatal affliction. The shadow of disease looms with a weight you have never truly felt in modern existence. Still, life here has its beauty too. The pace, though unrelenting, is deeply tied to nature's cycle. The villagers move to the rhythm of sun, moon, and seasons. The land, though harsh, provides. Festivals mark the calendar with moments of joy, when music, dancing, and feasting break the monotony of toil. These small pleasures are savoured intensely, perhaps even more meaningfully than modern distractions. As you slowly take stock of your strange new reality, you also begin to notice the social structure pressing in. The people around you are peasants, bound to the land, scratching out a living under the watch of a lord whose manor looms not too far away. You will soon learn that life here is not defined by personal ambition alone, but by hierarchy, obligation, and tradition. But for now, you stand in the mud as the medieval sun rises, your thoughts drifting between panic and curiosity. You have woken in another age, and somehow you must live it. The villagers' wary eyes keep following you as you try to gather your bearings. A man with a weathered face, his clothes rough-spun from wool, approaches and mutters something in Middle English, a jumble of familiar syllables, but twisted into strange forms that almost sound understandable, and yet slip away when you try to grasp the meaning. It reminds you vaguely of Shakespeare's language, but far less polished. He points toward the fields and then toward you as though asking what your place is here. In this world, everyone is woven into a web of obligations. To remain idle is suspicious. To have no land, no trade, and no lord might mark you as a drifter, dangerous, unwanted. Already, you sense the threat of being identified as an outsider. The medieval village you have found yourself in is not a democracy. It is a carefully structured organism, built on feudal obligations and traditions that weigh heavier than iron. At the top of the local pyramid, though still beneath kings and barons, is the lord of the manor. That manor, though still unseen, rules everything in this hamlet. The peasants toil not purely for themselves but also for him. For 3 or 4 days of every week, they must labour on his fields, growing crops that he will keep. The rest of the days, they are permitted to till their own narrow strips of land, though part of those yields too must be handed over in rent, tithes, or taxes. The church stands nearby as equal in power to the manor, demanding not only belief, but also a tenth of what little peasants can produce. That tenth, the tithe, is taken in barley, wheat, eggs, or even chickens, stored away in the church's granaries as a holy tax. Refuse to pay, and you risk not only worldly punishment, but also eternal damnation painted vividly in sermons. It is quickly clear that daily life revolves entirely around survival and service. If you were hoping for leisurely mornings and afternoon strolls, you will be disappointed. At sunrise the fields call. the open strips of farmland lying on the edges of the village. They are divided into long, thin strips, each assigned to different families. People gather with their simple tools, wooden ploughs tipped with iron, drawn by oxen groaning under their yoke. Children scatter seeds behind the plough while other family members hoe weeds or scythe grass. Farming here is hard, repetitive, endless. No fertilizers are available beyond animal dung and yields are low. Famines can arise from a few poor harvests. Every grain counts. Your modern hands, soft from keyboards and screens, would soon blister on the wooden handles of the hoe. Calluses and strength among the peasants come not from choice but inevitability, bred by years in the fields from childhood onward. You may try lifting a bundle of thatch or wielding a scythe, only to realize how awkward and heavy it feels. To them you would be clumsy and unpracticed. To survive here without standing out, you would need to learn quickly, or at least fake competence, while hoping not to draw the jeers of the laborers beside you. Life is no kinder for the women of the village. Their labor begins before dawn, baking bread on flat stones, milking goats, and spinning wool into yarn. They carry water from the communal well, cook pottage, keep an eye on children, mend clothes, and tend small kitchen gardens. Their days are relentless, their rest minimal. Women here are not simply domestic caretakers. They are vital workers, contributing constantly to the family's survival. Marriage is less about romance and more about practicality. One more alliance in a world shaped by survival and obligation. Children, too, have no carefree childhood as you know it. From the age of 5 or 6, they are expected to help with tasks, driving birds from crops, fetching water, tending animals, carrying firewood. Play exists, of course, in stolen moments with sticks, balls made of rags, or makeshift toys carved of wood. But childhood is brief and often cut short by harsh realities. Many children do not survive past infancy, the weight of disease and poor nutrition striking hardest at the most vulnerable. At midday, the peasants pause for their meagre meal, most often bread and ale and perhaps a little cheese if they are fortunate. They gather in the fields or by the hearths of their cottages, bowls resting on laps, dirt smudging their faces. There is laughter, some gossip of neighbours, and always a looming consciousness of their place in the world. Unlike in the modern era, where upward movement is seen as attainable, here one rarely changes class or station. If you are born a peasant, you will die a peasant. Dreams of wealth and liberty are fairy stories told in whispers, not realities anyone genuinely expects. From afar, the lord's manor dominates the countryside, either a stone hall or a fortified wooden complex. It is where rules are made, taxes collected, disputes settled. When harvests are gathered, carts creak toward the manor, half filled with the fruits of peasants' labour, tribute for the lord's tables. You imagine those tables laden with roasted meats and flagons of wine, a luxury unheard of in your straw-roofed hut. To reinforce his authority, the lord may occasionally sweep into the village on horseback, armoured and aloof, his presence as undeniable as the heavy beating of hooves in the mud. To peasants, he is not only a man, but also a symbol of their station, one that cannot be challenged without deadly consequences. Meanwhile, the church bell calls again, urging parishioners to prayer or service. Religion is not a gentle shade here. It is a bright, consuming sun, dictating the year with its festivals, fasts, holy days, and sermons. Villagers attend Mass not only for salvation, but also because absence would invite suspicion. The church gives meaning to suffering, promising paradise after death, but also reminding them constantly of sin and hellfire. Priests wield enormous influence, their Latin chants mysterious, and their authority backed by both divine fear and tangible penalties. For someone like you, with modern skeptical questions, speaking your doubts aloud might be catastrophic. To suggest disbelief could earn you exile, punishment, or worse. Silence and outward piety would be your best disguise in this devout world. As afternoon stretches on, more toil awaits. Repairing tools, tending livestock, preparing meals. Smoke curls again into the sky as hearths are lit, filling cottages with flickering light. You watch the villagers move through tasks with practiced endurance, their faces lined not by age alone, but by years of labour from childhood. You realise life expectancy here is short by modern measures. Perhaps 35 or 40 as an elder, the weight of survival eroding the body swiftly. Sickness, childbirth, accidents, all claim lives quickly. Evening comes with a modest meal, conversation in a dialect still hard for you to grasp, and perhaps a tale told by the fire of saints, heroes, or outlaws in the woods. Families huddle together for warmth, sharing straw mattresses and patched blankets. The world outside is pitch black now, only stars and moon lighting the landscape. There are no street lamps, no glowing windows, only the sounds of night, owls, the restless shifting of cattle, maybe faint howls from the distant forest. Night here is thick, total, a time when humans truly yield to the dark. You sit there, stunned by how alien yet fascinating this life feels. Every small detail, from the coarse fabric scratching your skin to the smoky taste of ale, reminds you of the enormous gulf between your era and theirs. Yet this is your reality now. These people, their toil, their beliefs, their fears. This is the world you must live in. And you are still only beginning to uncover the enormity of it. Your feet still muddy, your mind swimming. You begin to sense that this medieval life is not merely strange. It might engulf you completely if you are not careful. The morning after your bewildering arrival, you wake to the sound of church bells echoing across the village. They are not the polite chimes of a modern clock tower, but deep, resonant tolls that shake the air and command attention. The bell tells everyone the same thing. It is time to rise, time to obey the rhythm of the day that has been set not by individual choice, but by centuries of religious authority and communal expectation. In medieval life, your day is not your own. It is carved into set patterns: prayer, labor, obedience, survival. Stepping outside, you notice how quickly the village comes alive under the cool grey light of morning. Smoke already curls from chimneys. The cockerels have been up since dawn, pecking noisily beneath wagon wheels. Men gather with oxen to plough, women carry baskets toward the well, and children dart about, hauling wood. The main street, still just a track of mud with pools of water that refuse to drain, teems with motion. Yet all this movement is bounded by rules unspoken but understood deeply by everyone here. And to understand this world you've woken into, you realize you must learn its order, particularly the rigid social ladder that governs it. At the pinnacle is the king. You will not see him, nor most likely even hear of him directly. But his influence is everywhere. The king grants land to nobles in exchange for loyalty and military service. Those nobles grant portions of it to knights, who in turn owe their support and protection. At the very bottom, where you stand, are the peasants, tied by tradition and obligation, bound to work both for themselves and for their lords. This pyramid of duty is called feudalism. And if you are going to survive here, you must fit yourself into its heavy structure like a gear in a machine. Imagine lines radiating out from the manor house, threads tying peasant to lord, knight to noble to king. The lord owns the land. The peasants work it. The knight provides protection. In return, he gleans food, shelter, and income from the land. Each life supports the tier above. From your modern imagination, it might seem suffocating, but here it simply is. It's the law of existence, unquestioned like the seasons or the rising of the sun. And the power that holds this order together is not merely legal or military, it is religious. To defy the chain of feudal obligation is to risk not just punishment by men, but wrath of God. At least, that is what people are taught to believe. This structure seeps into every interaction. Notice how the peasants bow slightly when the reeve passes. The reeve is the local overseer, a peasant himself, but granted authority by the lord to collect rents and ensure labour. Notice how the blacksmith, respected for his skill, still lowers his gaze when addressing a mounted soldier clanking past. And notice how even those few words whispered aloud by villagers fall silent when the priest walks near, robes fluttering, rosary swinging. Every gesture is measured. Everyone knows their place. In this world of hierarchy, being uncertain of your own position, as you are now, is dangerous. As you walk further down the muddy road, you see the manor looming ahead. It is not the fairy tale castle of storybooks, but a stout rectangular building of timber and stone, raised slightly above the village. Its wooden palisade is hardly impregnable, but enough to remind peasants of where power resides. Within its hall, the lord holds court, settles disputes, and exacts taxes. Stray too near without reason and guards may shift uneasily, hands on their weapons. Here, your modern instincts, to wander freely, to ask questions, would look suspicious. In this age, curiosity is rarely a virtue. It can be seen as insolence, or worse, as rebellion. Your eyes are drawn to the knight on horseback riding past. His armour, though far from shining like in legend, clangs heavily with each step of his horse. The metal, though dulled from use, gleams enough to announce wealth. His helmet visor lifts slightly, and the man beneath is not the polished hero you expected, but a hardened, scarred warrior, eyes narrowed as he surveys peasants clearing the road. Knights were not gentle guardians of the weak. They were professionals of violence, trained to kill, sworn to their lord. Protection for peasants came at a cost, and the cost was loyalty, submission, food, and taxes that drained their lives. The more you take in, the heavier this world weighs. You realize how little freedom exists for the average person here. Movement is restricted. Peasants rarely leave their village in their whole lives. Trade and fairs are rare, exciting disturbances in this otherwise uniform existence. For most, the known world stretches only a few miles from their birth, and even your steps here in the village are already raising suspicion. Strangers are anomalies, potential thieves, perhaps spies, conceivably even devilish influences. People eye you the way a farmer eyes a wolf that has strayed too close to the sheepfold. To blend in, perhaps you follow the peasants toward the fields. Rain has softened the earth into thick clay, caking boots and slowing every step. Wooden plows creak as oxen pull them. Behind, peasants sow seeds from rough sacks carried across their backs. It's monotonous, muddy and exhausting, and yet essential. Every missed stroke of the hoe, every wasted seed matters, for winter will come soon enough, and famine is always a lurking threat. Farming here is a gamble with nature, and hunger is the punishment for failure. Whether you like it or not, this work will pull you in. The only shield from suspicion is participation. As evening sets again, the villagers gather near the fire at the small inn at the edge of the village green. It is less an inn like you imagine, and more a smoky one-room alehouse. The warmth of bodies crowds the air. A single small hearth glows, smoke weaving into thick beams above. Tankards of ale are cupped by calloused hands, voices murmur, and laughter occasionally breaks through exhaustion. A fiddler scrapes away in the corner, his rhythm simple but steady. This is community, rough, noisy, imperfect, but binding. You find yourself withdrawing into the corner, trying not to stand out, absorbing everything with astonishment and unease. The priest appears once more, and the room hushes. He offers a blessing for the evening, his words in Latin, incomprehensible but weighty. All bow their heads. You do too, if only because everyone else has done so. Already you understand. Adaptation here is survival. Belief is not optional. Outward conformity is demanded, perhaps even essential. A single wrong word could mark you as an oddity at best, or a heretic at worst. In this room, under these eyes, you realize pretending may become your newfound skill. You will play their role, speak their words with care, move as they move. This is how you disappear into the machinery of medieval life. And when the alehouse finally quiets, when villagers drift back to cottages, you return to your straw bedding. The fire has gone to embers, the world outside silent save for animals shifting in barns. You lie awake a long while, staring at the smoke-darkened beams overhead. The strangeness of this reality presses in on you, exhaling with each creak of wood, each gust of cold wind under the doors. Slowly, you understand, this is no dream. This is a life. And unless you awaken back into your own century, it is the one you now must live. As dawn breaks once again, your body aches in ways you never expected. The straw mattress has left scratches on your skin, your back feels stiff, and the trial of working with crude tools yesterday lingers in your shoulders. You barely slept, yet around you the village is already alive. Sleep here is not indulgent, not something to draw out with alarms and snooze buttons. The rooster and the church bell are the only reminders you need. The rhythm of medieval life dictates when you rise and when you rest, and everyone follows it as naturally as breathing. Today, your eyes are drawn beyond the muddy paths and the cluster of cottages toward the open fields, and farther away, the faint shadow of a stone tower on the horizon. That tower stands as a symbol of the greater world that surrounds this quiet. Settlement, castles, fortifications, and hallmarks of power, both protective and threatening. Curiosity pulls you toward it, and soon, trudging with weary villagers bound for another day's toil, you begin to sense how sprawling and formidable this medieval landscape truly is. Castles in this era are not fairy tale palaces. They are practical machines of war and authority. Walls are thick, constructed not for beauty but for defense. Gates are iron-banded and narrow, forcing all through single entry points controlled by guards. Within such walls might live the lord, his family, knights and retainers, villagers. like those you walk with, rarely gain entry unless summoned or unless their labour is required. For most peasants, the castle is both protector and oppressor, a looming reminder of security during raids, but also an ever-present symbol of the taxes and demands extracted from them. On the path, villagers whisper as a small troop of armed men ride past, mud splashing from their horses' hooves. They glare down sharply, but with disinterest, like one might glance at livestock. Soldiers in this world are not heroic guardians. They are a fact of authority, trained and armoured extensions of the Lord's will. Their swords clink faintly, blades dulled by repeated sharpening, cloaks heavy against the chill. Peasants step out of the road in practiced humility, eyes lowered. You, trying to mimic them, follow suit. And already you sense how every gesture here can mark one clearly as compliant or simply strange. Nowhere, however, is the medieval order more visibly displayed than in the church itself. The closer you draw to its stone structure, the more you feel the weight of faith in this world. It is the only building that carries deliberate grandeur amid the cottages. A tall wooden door creaks open, revealing fragrant smoke from candles and incense. Medieval worship is not the quiet simplicity of modern chapels, but a sensory flood. Light flickering across painted saints, incense choking the air, chants resonating in a language unfamiliar but solemn. Inside, you stand shoulder to shoulder with villagers. No pews offer rest. Instead, worshippers kneel directly on the stone floor, their clothing ragged and muddy. Latin words spill from the priest's mouth, rhythmic and absolute, while the congregation bows and crosses themselves in unison. You follow, unsure, imitating carefully. Here, there is little tolerance for deviation. A failure to respond correctly might not only draw suspicion, but also mark you as aligned with forces of evil. For these people, religion is not an abstract belief. It is a constant battle for their souls, woven into every moment of their existence. The priest preaches from a raised pulpit, his voice booming, describing sin, penance, and the fire awaiting those who stray. His gestures slice the air, and the villagers' faces reflect awe, obedience, and sometimes fear. You realize how potent this tool truly is. With few literate people and no other sources of information, the priest's words are authority itself. He interprets the world. Storms are punishments, diseases are tests, fortunes are blessings, all ruled by a divine hand. In this environment, doubt is dangerous. If you voice skepticism, you would not simply be dismissed, you would risk your very safety. As the service concludes, the tithe is collected. Villagers step forward, offering sacks of grain or baskets of eggs, small gifts that, in truth, are burdens scraping their already narrow survival. You see the weight on their faces as they part with food, knowing every kernel matters for their families, yet compelled to hand it over. Refusal is not an option. God demands his share, and so does the priest, his granaries growing while peasant cupboards shrink. Leaving the church, you watch the villagers gather briefly in huddles outside, exchanging news. Births, illnesses, disputes. Rumours travel quickly here. Who was caught poaching in the Lord's wood? Who has not paid rent? Whose cow wandered into a neighbour's plot? Information is lifeblood, but also danger, for gossip can swell into accusations, into trials. Social bonds are strong and suffocating all at once. Everyone knows everyone. Anonymity is impossible. For you, the outsider, inserting yourself too boldly into these conversations risks scrutiny sharper than any blade. As you walk back down the muddy path, the difference between this world and yours grows sharper. In your time, individuality is celebrated, skepticism allowed, news available at a moment's tap. Here, unity and conformity are demanded. The priest's word carries eternal stakes, and survival depends not on self-expression, but on service, humility, and faith. When the bell tolls again at midday, you pause by one of the rough cottages and watch as a family shares a small meal of bread, a little cheese, and ale poured from a wooden jug. Their talk is quiet, punctuated by weary laughter. And though the meal itself is meagre, it carries warmth. In their hardscrabble lives, such simple togetherness is as valued as feasts are to kings. The day stretches long with work, the fields swallowing the hours until the sun leans toward the horizon again. And as evening cools the air, the villagers withdraw to their smoky homes, repeating the patterns they have known for generations. You settle again onto itchy straw, hearing the sounds of children breathing nearby in the shared space, and realize that here, the nights do not belong purely to dreams. In darkness, imaginations fill with holy visions, ghost stories, and fears of spirits. Magic and the supernatural lace every creak in the beams, every gust of wind rattling the thatch. In their minds, the physical and spiritual worlds blur completely. Your modern rational instincts struggle with this, but lying there in the smoky, dark, you feel something too. How completely their lives are bound to mystery, faith, and the unseen. For them, this is not superstition, but survival. For you, it is a stark reminder. You must learn this language of belief, or always remain foreign in a world that allows little room for outsiders. The cock's crow slices through the chilly dawn yet again, and this time you're less startled. Slowly, your body begins to match the rhythm of medieval life, rising earlier, moving with the community, thinking not in hours but in tides of light and dark. When you step outside, the air is damp and earthy, dew collecting on the grass beside the muddy road. Smoke drifts lazily from cottage roofs, and already the thudding of mallets and creaking of wagons echo through the morning. And today, you are drawn towards something new. The bustle around the edge of the village green. Whispers travelled last night of a fair, and already stalls and carts are appearing like bright spots of chaos against the ordinary grind of peasant labour. Medieval fairs were explosions of colour and energy, irregular but precious interruptions in the monotony of planting and harvesting. Here, peasants, travelling merchants and craftsmen collided in a noisy whirl that felt as close to celebration as many villagers ever knew. Imagine the sudden shock of fabrics dyed in rare hues, deep crimson, faded azure, rough greens, spreading across makeshift stalls. Foreign spices radiate scents so unfamiliar they almost sting your nose. Pepper, cinnamon, cloves. Baskets of apples, nuts, onions, and even honeycomb draw eager eyes. You see villagers clutching small coins or handfuls of goods, ready to barter for what luxuries they can afford, though luxuries might mean something as modest as a woolen cap or a pewter spoon. People surge in restless energy, hawkers bellowing, children gaping at jugglers, farmers shouting over the din. The sound is a muddle of languages and dialects, each slightly foreign even to the villagers themselves, for peddlers wander from far lands. A man from Flanders displays bolts of fine cloth, while another with a heavy accent mutters promises about exotic remedies kept in small glass vials. In a life so restrained by routine, this cacophony of smells, colours, voices, and possibility feels overwhelming. And you realise too how precious such gatherings are. For peasants, the fair is not just buying and selling, it's connection to a larger, unseen world. Yet fairs, for all their wonder, are also fraught. Theft hides behind laughter, quick hands reaching for dangling purses. Fights erupt over prices or insults shouted through ale-loosened tongues. The local lord's agents patrol with watchful eyes, ready to tax every sale and pocket their own share. And always, hovering on the smell of roasted meats and ale, is the potent shadow of the church. Priests sometimes wander the crowd, glaring at dice games or sternly reminding merrymakers to keep sin at bay. The clash between faith's severity and the fair's revelry is constant. The same society that preaches humility and chastises lust gladly loses itself in noise, trade and drink at these rare moments of freedom. You drift through stalls cautiously, still wary of your strangeness. It's easy to marvel at the display. Rough leather boots hammered with iron nails, knives honed crude but sharp, candles clustered like pale waxen towers, charms strung from bones or carved wood promising health and protection. Trinkets or holy tokens are hawked shamelessly, everything from a pilgrim's badge stamped with relics of saints to a splinter of some holy wood claimed to have touched the true cross. To modernize, it is hucksterism, but to the villagers, it is salvation in miniature. Tokens they cling to in hopes of warding off sickness, famine, or bad fortune. Amid the bustle, performance thrives. A troupe of travelling entertainers sets up a crude stage of boards, their voices loud and animated. They act out morality plays, allegories where costumed devils tempt foolish villagers, only to be driven back by angels or holy men with painted wooden swords. Adults laugh, children shriek in delight but also absorb the warning: sin leads to ruin, obedience to salvation. Minstrels wander too, strumming lutes or fiddles, singing tales of distant nights and battles that stir imagination. In a life that offers so little beyond labour, such performances are not tricks of theatre. They are nourishment of another kind, stories woven into the marrow of the common folk. As evening descends, the fair turns rowdier. Ale flows from casks, flames from braziers flare bright, shadows leap from dancers stamping their feet on the trampled earth. For once, laughter drowns the heaviness of obligation, and even the poorest peasants grin as their shoulders sway to music. The entertainments are not sophisticated. No orchestras, no opera, no refined art. But they pulse with raw joy. A bear chained for spectacle lumbers awkwardly to whistles, tumblers contort in astonishing shapes, and crude jokes swap through the crowd, greeted with roars of approval. You catch yourself smiling too, carried by the rare tide of festivity. But just as quickly as it bloomed, the fair withers with the approach of night. Merchants pack their goods, guards snuff torches, families clutch their earnings and drift home. The green empties, trampled grass carrying only the echo of noise. Tomorrow fields and tools and exhaustion await again. Tonight's revel will fade to memory, but memories are valuable here. They fuel spirits in the long seasons of labour yet to come. And as you walk back with villagers under a sky ignited with stars, you are struck by how both narrow and vast this world feels. Narrow, because a peasant's life seldom strays beyond these walls, these strips of farmland. Vast, because in moments like today you glimpse how much lies beyond the horizon. Fabrics from distant lands, spices carried by caravans, songs that remember ancient battles. The medieval world, for all its hardship, is not without wonder. It is simply that survival smothers much of its beauty under toil and fear. In your straw bed that night, you replay the day's colours and sounds in your mind. Laughter, songs and scents linger like echoes of another life. Yet the priest's word, the Lord's presence, the villagers' ever-watchful eyes press heavy once more. A celebration has passed, but reality remains. Tomorrow it will be back to ploughs, prayers, and the endless march of obligation. And you, still finding your place, realize that you walk a thin thread, absorbing everything, careful not to misstep. For while life here can glow briefly bright, it can just as easily crush the outsider who fails to conform. The fair is gone, and with it the momentary blast of colour and sound. By the next dawn, the village slumps back into its rhythm of toil, as if nothing had happened. Smoke resumes its steady climb from the chimneys. Timber thuds against ox-drawn ploughs, and the squelching mud reclaims the green. It leaves you with a realization. Joy in this world is fleeting and precious precisely because it is so rare. Yet life does not pause. It cannot. And soon, you feel your focus shifting from the spectacle of fairs to the harsher truths that govern the existence of every person here. Hunger, health, and the inescapable spectre of mortality. Your stomach growls long before the midday break. Though not only from hunger, the meals here are meagre and rough, heavy on grains, light on everything else. You chew a slice of coarse, dark bread offered by a kind villager, noticing how gritty it feels in your mouth. Millstones often grind pebbles into flour, so teeth wear down quickly. The bread is accompanied by a thin onion soup, more water than vegetable. Ale, served in a wooden cup, cloudy and warm, is not indulgence, but necessity, often safer to drink than untreated water. You sip it, surprised at its weak sweetness, and think about your modern access to grocery stores and restaurants. Here there is no such option. Seasons decide meals. If crops rot, people starve. Malnutrition shapes every face you see. Children are smaller than their years suggest. Limbs spindly, bellies sometimes swollen. Adults are lean, bodies worn prematurely. Their eyes carry resilience, but underneath, a permanent fatigue. And for a moment, you almost feel guilty. Modern abundance makes you forget how fragile the balance between plenty and famine truly is. In this world, one harsh winter, one bad harvest, one blight on the crop could unravel everything. Medicine fares no better. What little knowledge villagers have comes through herbal remedies and folklore. Sage, garlic, honey, chamomile, these are their cures, prescribed with whispered prayers against devils believed to cause disease. Broken bones are set with wooden splints, wounds wrapped in herbs, fevers bled with leeches. Sometimes the treatments kill more surely than the illnesses. You glance at a child coughing deep, struggling for breath, and realize modern medicine would have saved them. But here, most simply wait, pray, and resign themselves to God's will. The line between faith and desperation blurs into one. The priest, of course, offers blessings against plagues and charms against misfortune. The sign of the cross is sketched over every weakness. To the villagers, sickness is not biology but sin, punishment for wickedness, or the work of malevolent spirits. People whisper of charms buried at thresholds, of curses cast by neighbors. A hunched old woman who mutters to herself is eyed with suspicion. Her presence is enough to spur talk of witchcraft. You quickly understand. In this fragile society, suspicion can be a more deadly disease than plague. If fate needs explaining, blame will be assigned. You hear tales of dreadful times, of the great pestilences, when carts carried bodies through the streets of towns, stacked high, when bells tolled endlessly and priests chanted prayers over grave pits filled by the hundreds. Even if such horrors are not present here now, the fear of them trembles always at the edge of villagers' conversations. They live with death pressing close, and so every superstition, every ritual, is armor against the terrifying unknown. Death itself does not wait for old age. The average peasant may live only 30 or 40 years if fortune holds, less if sickness strikes early. Childbirth claims many women, infection many men, famine many children. Life is brief, and lives rarely stretch into what you would call middle age. To see someone past 50 is to see someone considered wise and ancient, a relic of uncommon resilience. In this world, grey hair itself feels miraculous. And yet, in the face of such constant vulnerability, there is not only despair, but a kind of acceptance that baffles you. These people understand suffering as an expected guest, not a shocking intruder. They pray, laugh when they can, work when they must, and endure. Their resilience is hard, weathered, astonishing. If to you their lives seem unbearably grim, to them it is merely life, the way things are, the way things always will be. As evening falls, you retreat into the familiar smoky hut, and it strikes you how cramped these homes are. One room accommodates parents, children, sometimes grandparents too. Animals may sleep inside, their warmth an advantage in winter. Privacy is foreign here. Matters you'd consider intimate, birth, illness, even death, take place in plain view of family. The hearth fire roars at the center of this life, shielding them against hunger and cold. Smoke fills your lungs, stinging your eyes. It is suffocating. Yet for them it is comfort. The smell of survival. Night, after the simple meal, a grandmother begins telling a story, her voice low, eyes gleaming in the firelight. Tales are the entertainment of this age. No books line shelves, no theatre tickets exist. Instead, memory carries wonder. She recounts a story of St. George defeating the dragon, a tale every child here knows but still listens to with open mouths. For them, myth is not fantasy. It is inspiration, warning, and truth rolled together. Each lesson reminds them: submission, faith, courage. These stories are swords against despair, much as bread is defense against hunger. As you curl on the straw once more, the heaviness of what you have witnessed sinks deep. You understand hunger now not as inconvenience, but as gnawing inevitability. You sense death not as fear for the distant future, but as a neighbor lodged close by. And yet strangely, these people who bow to lords and kneel before priests endure with determination. They carry on with routines of faith, labor, and each other's company. There is fragile strength in their laughter by the fire, their hands on plows, their voices raised in chant. And while your modern thoughts rage against the unfairness, you realize, to them, this is not tragedy. It is simply the way the world is, unchanging and eternal. For better or worse, in this world you now inhabit, life is short, harsh, yet lived with remarkable resilience. You, still stumbling through its rhythms, now feel its weight settle fully upon your shoulders. And it presses you one step deeper into the strange reality of medieval existence. Morning comes again, and this time you notice something stirring beyond the routine sounds of farm tools and animals. A rumble, faint at first, grows as villagers stream toward the edge of the green, their voices thick with nervous excitement. You follow, curiosity tugging you along, until you see riders approaching, the gleam of steel helmets, the rhythmic pounding of hooves, banners snapping in the wind. A troop of soldiers, knights among them, returns from service to their lord. And suddenly, you understand a reality you've not yet faced directly. This is an age ruled not only by plows and prayers, but by war. Medieval life is never far removed from conflict. Whether skirmishes between rival lords, raids from across borders, or great campaigns called by a king, war is constant. These men ride back hardened, their shields scuffed, their armor dented, their faces carrying both pride and weariness. Children run alongside, cheering with wide eyes, though peasants look less thrilled. War is glory for lords but strain for villagers, who must feed soldiers, surrender sons for service, and endure the taxes war demands long after the fighting ends. You watch the knights dismount, steel boots thudding, swords rattling in their scabbards. They stand taller than peasants, not merely from birth, but from years of training since boyhood. A knight's path begins at 7, as a page in his lord's household, learning courtesy, combat, and faith. By adolescence, he becomes a squire, shadowing his master, caring for horses, sharpening weapons, fighting in skirmishes. And by his early 20s, if proven, he kneels to receive the sword upon his shoulder, the solemn dubbing that makes him knight. For peasants, this life is unreachable, like another species altogether. To you, these men seem larger than reality, embodiments of both awe and threat. Their horses, mighty destriers bred for war, stamp the ground heavily, nostrils flaring. A peasant's entire livelihood could not purchase one hoof of these beasts, yet knights ride them as extensions of themselves. Their weapons too are symbols of status. A sword here is more than steel. It is privilege, faith, and heritage rolled into one. It can cost as much as a villager's home, yet it swings freely in the knight's hand with an ease that makes you uneasy. For knights are not bound only to fight enemies abroad. They enforce their lord's justice at home as well, and their blade can fall on peasants who falter in loyalty. Protection and intimidation blur constantly. The villagers gather in the manor yard to offer service. Some bring bread, others grain, others livestock, set aside as part of the feudal demand. The lord, appearing at last, surveys his subjects from the hall steps. He is cloaked in fur, his face weathered but stern, flanked by retainers with eyes sharp and calculating. His voice booms across the yard, praising God for victory, reminding peasants of their duty, promising protection in return for obedience. Around you, men and women bow, heads dropped, hands clasped in prayer. You copy them swiftly. To hesitate would invite disaster. Power here is not subtle. It is displayed, embodied, and reinforced with steel at every turn. Not all soldiers wear glittering armor. You notice common levies among the troop, peasants themselves dragged into service when lords demand it. Their gear is crude, leather rather than chain, spears rather than swords. Faces bear exhaustion that armor cannot disguise. These are the expendable ranks of war, pulled from fields, marched to conflict, and returned battered, if they return at all. It grinds at you. These men till soil with the same hands that wield spears, feeding families when they can, dying in campaigns they hardly understand. By afternoon, training begins on the green. Knights practice charges, lances angle to unseat opponents, while squires run to reset wooden targets and collect shattered poles. The thunder of hooves shakes the earth, and when lances splinter with piercing cracks, peasants gasp and cheer. The spectacle mirrors what you've seen in reenactments, tournaments staged in films and books. Yet here it is no play. Training sharpens muscle memory for battlefields where arrows fall like storms, where steel meets flesh without mercy. War means more than arms. It reshapes everything. Villagers must pay additional levies in grain, wool, and coin to sustain their lord's campaigns. Craftsmen labor to forge weapons, fletch arrows, mend armor. Fields are left untended while men march, and hunger digs deeper. Distant victories may raise the lord's prestige, but the cost always falls heavy on the shoulders of those least able to bear it. Watching this world, you realize knights are both admired and resented. Songs celebrate their valor, yet whispers speak also of their cruelty, their arrogance, their appetite for dominance. As twilight falls, you see men in the alehouse comparing scars, recounting battles with half pride, half anguish. They boast of swords swung and foes struck down, but in quieter tones they mutter of friends never returning, of wounds that will fester, of hunger gnawing even as they fight for glory far from home. War is not simply ribbons and pageantry. It is mud, blood, and exhaustion etched into every line of their faces. That night, as you settle once more into smoky dark, your mind replays the sight of armored figures looming over peasants stooped in submission. Protection here is inseparable from domination. The shining idea of knighthood, noble champions, valiant heroes, fades against the reality. A life of violence demanded loyalty and fragile bargains between power and survival. And surrounded by it, you cannot help but wonder, if called to war in this time, as all men eventually are, would you endure or simply break beneath it? Yet just as that question hangs heavy, you also remember the laughter of children chasing after mounted knights, their eyes gleaming with wonder. For them, knighthood is no burden. It is dream and aspiration, story made flesh. This contradiction, glory and cruelty, honor and oppression, defines much of medieval life. It is a balance that grips you now as you lie awake, the echoes of hooves and swords still ringing in your ears. The rooster cries again, but this time you do not startle. By now, the rhythm of medieval life has carved its shape into you. You rise with the smoke of the hearth, walk the paths that feel endlessly muddy beneath bare feet, and hear the familiar symphony of bleating animals, clanging tools, and hushed prayers drifting from the church. Days blur into one another, marked not by calendars, but by bells, by seasons, by endless repetition. Yet today feels different, not because life has changed, but because you sense the weight of what it means to have lived here. Even briefly, you've seen the structure of this world, the rigid ladder of feudal duty that binds everyone. Kings, lords, knights, priests, all command with authority that shapes every action. And below them, peasants toil, their backs bent, their hands chapped and blistered, their lives devoted to pulling survival from reluctant soil. You now understand that freedom, as you once knew it, is a luxury unknown here. Every movement of these people is dictated by necessity, obligation, and often fear. Yet at the same time, their strength lies precisely in that endurance, in the unyielding rhythm they accept and live. Meals remain plain, bread, ale, pottage, but no longer surprise you. Hunger keeps them sharp, and gratitude threads through their simplicity. The smoky air indoors has become almost ordinary to you, its sting no longer startling. At night, the small flicker of flame that illuminates blackened beams carries more comfort than nuisance. Straw prickles your skin. Dogs shuffle restlessly in corners. Children murmur in sleep. And you realize this closeness, this lack of privacy you once found stifling, is intimacy for them. They are never truly alone. Family, neighbors, the community, everyone exists together. A shared life that makes the weight of hardship bearable. You've also walked shoulder to shoulder with fear, sickness, malnutrition, death, all constant companions here. The cough of a child, the feeble shuffle of an elder, the wary glance cast at a neighbor accused of strange mutterings. All of it echoes with fragility. Yet fear is harnessed here as well, shaped by religion into ritual. Candles burned, prayers intoned, sins confessed. They are lifelines. Where modern minds demand proof, here faith answers with certainty. And though you may question its absolutes, you understand at last why they hold to it so deeply. In a world that can take so much away, belief is the weapon that keeps despair at bay. The darker side of power, the knights with their glinting swords, the lords demanding dues, has shown you how violence and protection entwine. Villagers bow, not out of reverence alone, but from survival. They know rebellion is not bravery here, it is futility. And yet, watch closely, and you see lines of quiet defiance, a smirk behind bowed heads, whispers carried low, stories of saints and heroes who triumphed against cruelty. Resigned as they often seem, the spirit of resistance glows faintly, flickering like embers. There are joys too, fleeting and fragile, but powerful. The fair with its chaos of colour, the laughter of children chasing entertainers, the stomping of feet to the fiddler's tune, or evenings when stories painted dragons and saints across smoky rafters, igniting wonder in small, wide eyes. These sparks, scattered through days of labour, make the harshness almost bearable. You realise that joy here is sharper, brighter, precisely because it is rare. Standing at the edge of the fields, looking at the manor in the distance, and the church's shadow stretching across the green, you grasp the paradox of this era you've woken into. It is a world narrow in scope yet immense in meaning. A life short and brutal by your modern measure, yet lived with intensity, with bonds you might never know in the solitary sprawl of the future. For them, eternity is in prayers and afterlife. For you, it is in memory and story, different, but not entirely unrecognizable. You wonder, as the sun dips low and villagers return with aching limbs and tired smiles, what it means that you have walked here, if only briefly. Perhaps what you have seen is not only distant history, but also a mirror, reminding you how fragile survival always is, how power is both shield and chain, how stories are the threads that keep humanity moving forward through hardship. As night closes in, the final song of the day is not music, but the low murmur of villagers settling to rest, a symphony of coughing, shifting, prayers whispered under breath, and soft snores. You lie back in straw, your eyes tracing the smoky beams overhead one last time. This world, different as it is, has wrapped you into its rhythm. It has shown you hunger, fear, labor, laughter, submission, and resilience. And now, as sleep folds around you, you realize something simple yet profound. The people of this age, in all their strangeness, are not so different from you. They hoped, they feared, they loved, they toiled, they sought meaning and fought to endure. Perhaps that is why the stories of their lives, so far from yours, still hold power, because through the haze of centuries, what it means to be human remains unchanged. You close your eyes in the dark medieval night, the sound of fire crackling nearby, and carry that truth with you into sleep.